This episode of To The Journey is brought to you by Audible.com, offering more than 180,000 titles for smartphone, tablet and desktop. To get a free audiobook of your choice and help Trek FM at the same time, visit audibletrial.com/trekfm. And also by Enterprise in Space, an international programme of the non-profit National Space Society. Find out how you can help science and education and become a virtual crew member aboard the NSS Enterprise Orbiter by visiting enterpriseinspace.org. And if you want to join in the conversation and share your thoughts on this episode, join the Babel Conference, our listeners group on Facebook. Just type Babel, that's B-A-B-E-L, into the Facebook search field. We look forward to seeing you there.
Hi, I'm Manuente Reme. I played Ichev on Star Trek Voyager, and you're listening to Trek FM.
I think it's safe to say that no one on this crew has been more obsessed with getting home than I have. But when I think about everything we've been through together, maybe it's not the destination that matters. Maybe it's the journey. And if that journey takes a little longer, so we can do something we all believe in, I can't think of any place I'd rather be, or any people I'd rather be with.
To the journey.
You're here.
To the journey.
Hi everyone at home and welcome. This is To The Journey. I'm your co-host, Kay Shaw, and with me as always are...
Suzanne Williamson and...
Zachary Fruhling.
Well, tonight's going to be a bit of a special episode of To The Journey.
Especially sad.
It's going to be a bit sad.
A very special episode of To The Journey. What is this, an episode of Who's the Boss?
Only if I get to be Mona.
I haven't seen this, so you're like way over my head at this point. You know how this goes. You guys mention an American show, I go, I haven't seen that, and you guys just laugh for 10 minutes and I sit here going, okay.
You're not missing much.
Okay, fair
You're
enough.
really not missing much.
So yes, we have a very special episode of To The Journey.
We do have a special episode of To The Journey, because we have a bit of news. This is going to be my last episode.
Say it ain't so.
No, I'm afraid it's true.
Can we talk you out of it?
I don't want to keep crying.
We have
about
tried.
this.
You have tried. I know, you have tried. And we've known about this for a little while. Eagle-eyed amongst our listeners might have noticed that you guys have said a few things that have suggested that I've come up with some of the topics over the last few weeks. They might have spotted that I've been kind of getting some of my pet favourite bits in to talk about.
Well, we did want to make sure that while you're still here, you had the chance to say everything about Voyager you wanted to say, so we let you pick the topics for the last few episodes.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. So there's not really an easy way to put it or an easy way to say it, but it is going to be my last episode of To The Journey.
And this is our 50th episode
It is our
of To The
50th
Journey
episode,
together.
yes, it's our 50th episode.
Can you believe that? To The Journey was a twinkle in our eye a little over a year ago, and here we've done 50 episodes together, and I'm so proud of the work we've done here together on the show, and I love being friends with you guys. We have an awesome time every single time we record.
Yeah,
We
do. And I really hope that it shows in what we put out, but, you know, we didn't really know each other terribly well before we were kind of put together to The Journey. Zach and I knew each other a little bit. Suzanne, we didn't know
I knew
at
nothing
all.
of you people.
we were kind
who
of thrown
is that
together in
woman?
the mix to do like To The Journey version 2, if you like, and we've just become like the absolute best of friends, and that's not going to change. We're still going to be really great friends, and we're still going to talk on a daily basis like we do at the moment. So that's not going to change at all.
We're going to twist your arm a little bit and see if we can get you back once in a while. And, you know, one of these years, we're going to get together and do a totally non-Star Trek podcast years from now.
Yes, we should definitely do something. I don't know what yet, but we should definitely do something.
A long ways down the road, a year or 2 or 5, or, you know, we don't know how. The future's hard to see, but at some point in the future, we'll be back doing this, all 3 of us together again,
Definitely.
I'm sure.
Absolutely, definitely. We'll be doing something together, whatever it turns out to be.
We should say that To The Journey is going to continue. Suzanne and I are going to continue with To The Journey. Kind of like when Lori left the show, very early into the Journey's history, leaving Shar and Tristan to take up the mantle of To the Journey on their own for a great many episodes. Suzanne and I will be continuing To the Journey, and the show will go on.
Okay, please stay. Please.
You guys are going to do a fantastic
She's like, don't leave
job.
me with him. Don't leave me with him.
Don't leave me with Zach and his dad jokes.
Suzanne's sanity will not be in any way compromised by having to put up with Zach on a weekly basis. You'll be fine. You can handle him. You can totally handle him. You can just keep him in line. It's fine. And if he bullies you, come to me and I'll sort him out. So, as I said, the last sort of few episodes, we've been picking some of the topics that were things that I really wanted to talk about. And I've saved, I think, probably the most important topic, or the topic that I really wanted to delve into the most, for the last. So this is going to be hopefully a good episode of To the Journey that you'll all enjoy. I've alluded to the fact that we were going to do this episode, I think, over and over again through like our 50 episodes, and I've said, oh, we're going to do an episode about that one day, and I'll save all my thoughts about it for then. So here we go. Here's the episode that I've been alluding to.
That day is here.
That day is here. That day is here. So today we are going to talk about our Voyager moments that mean the most to us and why. And also with that, we're going to talk around what it is about Voyager that we love so much, more than the other Star Trek shows and more than other shows on TV. What is it about Voyager that makes Voyager particularly special, even though it does get criticism from some areas? Why is it that we love it so much? What is it about Voyager? So that's what we're going to talk about tonight. So I guess a really great place to start on this topic would be the moment that I fell in love with Voyager. So I've mentioned this previously a little bit, but when I first came to watch Voyager, it was sometime after Voyager had actually been on TV. I'd been a huge TNG fan when I was a kid, hadn't really watched an awful lot of most of the rest of the shows. I'd seen bits of them, I was aware of them, I knew kind of stuff about them because I knew other people that were watching them, but I hadn't really gotten into any of the other shows. I was quite a TNG purist for a long time. When I actually came to watch Voyager, it was at a time in my life when I'd gotten out of a really long-term relationship. I'd been in a relationship with somebody for about 10 years and it had ended and I wasn't in a great place. And they were moving out of the house that we'd been living in together, and I'd never lived on my own. So I'd lived with my parents, and then I'd gone to university, and I'd lived in halls with other people, and I lived in houses with other people, and I met my partner at university. We'd moved in together afterwards, and I'd never lived by myself. I was really worried about spending time by myself and being on my own. And that was the time when I came to Voyager, when I was facing that for the first time at the age of about 32. So, living on your own for the first time at that age, that's pretty tough to have to face, especially given the fact that I'm somebody that, has issues with anxiety and all that type of thing. And even being left on my own for a night was a bit of a problem for me. So I came to Voyager for the very first time. And if I get emotional while I'm talking about this, I apologise in advance. That's also one of the reasons why I haven't talked about this too much before. But I watched the pilot of Voyager, and I'd always thought, you know what, I really need to get into more of the Star Trek. I really want to watch the rest of them. I love TNG. I'm a big fan of it, and I really wanted to get into the rest of them. So Voyager was the one that I picked. And I sat down to watch the pilot, feeling pretty rubbish about everything, just trying to find something to kind of cheer myself up and distract myself. And I watched the Voyager pilot, and I came to the part of the Voyager pilot where a whole load of stuff has gone down and we're into part 2, and there's this moment where Janeway has gone back to the array and she's gone to talk to the caretaker, and there's this sort of very muted mood lighting, and she's sitting there quietly talking to him as he's sort of sat quietly, and it's all very quiet and muted, and she's talking about the Acampa and about how he's felt like he's had this duty to protect them and all the rest of it for all these years because of what happened. And then she comes out with this quote. And the quote that she came out with was, "It's learning to live on their own that will help them to evolve." And at that moment in my life, there wasn't a quote that possibly could have been more relevant.
For a moment, Kay, I thought you were going to say that the Banjo Man inspired you to want to be a banjo player, and that was the most important Voyager moment for you.
Look at you and your inability to handle serious topics, Zach, and just needing...
I'm over here crying and you're bringing up the Banjo Man?
Someone has to lighten the mood around here.
Dude.
You're onto something, though, because I think Voyager has this overall therapeutic quality.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And I mean, at that moment when I was feeling like I was in a situation that I just didn't know how to handle, to hear, you know, Captain Janeway, who we've just had presented to us as this new captain who's in this really difficult situation, and to hear her say something like that, to say, you know, it's learning to survive on their own that helps them to evolve. That just like totally hit a nerve for me, like totally pinged something in my head. And that was the moment that I fell in love with Voyager. Like, I was just like, do you know what? This show is like something that I need right now.
Mm-hmm.
It almost sounds like you're saying that Voyager gave you the strength to get through it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, after that moment, you know, having that moment kind of hit me like that, I really just then had this resonance with it. And I really needed to just watch more. And I mean, I sort of probably watched the whole of Voyager over about 3 or 4 months, something like that. I mean, I went through periods of time of like binge watching a bit and then maybe just watching a few episodes some weeks, but I mean, then I just got onto the roll with it, and I just loved it. And it became something that just really helped me to get through that time in my life that was really difficult for me.
Mm-hmm. Well, I kind of have a similar story to that. I did watch Voyager during its first run, fell in love with the show, was heavily involved in fanfic at that time and message boards. And then when the show went off the air, I sort of left Star Trek for a little while because of the ending of Voyager. In the interim between that point and, let's say, about 5 years ago, I married someone who was very emotionally abusive. I ended up estranged from most of my family because of him. And about 5 years ago, I started rewatching the show, and it got to the Thaw episode. Now, he wasn't only emotionally abusive, he actually threatened my life a few times. And when, at the end, Janeway is talking to Fear, and he's like, what will become of me? And she's like all fear, you eventually vanish. At that point, I knew that I could get past the fear that he put inside of me. And because of that, I filed for divorce. I moved out. And not 6 months later, I met my wonderful husband, and we now have the most adorable little boy. And all because of Captain Janeway.
Yeah. Wow.
You know, it's useful, I think, to be able to personify your fears and talk to them and talk down at them, maybe.
It helped.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's amazing how much of an impact just a line like that can have. Because like you said, you know, that has made such a huge difference to your life. And I mean, just single lines like that, they just resonate in your head and they just make you think, do you know what? I can handle this. I can deal with this. There's people out there telling me this is not the end of where things are. You know, you can move forward from this. You can get past it. You can help yourself. You can improve things. Yeah, you can. And just somebody saying that, just you having that feeling that you're not alone and somebody else understands what you're going through, and you know your experience, whilst it's unique in all of its sort of details and everything, it's not a unique human experience. Other people have been in similar situations and other people have got past it, and it makes you believe that you can get past it as well.
Yeah,
I absolutely resonate with that.
Well, I think if there's something that's universal to Star Trek in general and Voyager in particular, is this idea that we can get past whatever it is, whatever the troubles are, whatever the situation is, whatever, you know, life and the universe and the crazy world we live in throws at us, that somehow we can muster our human strength and figure out a way to get through it.
And there's always hope.
There is always hope. And I think that Star Trek, just in the way that it's presented and the way that it's written, just has the power to put that out there in a way that's more resonant, I think, than a lot of shows. And I'm sure there's a lot of other shows and movies and things like that people have found personal significance in, but I hear this a lot with Star Trek. A lot of people say, oh, well, you know, I had this really kind of epiphany with Star Trek, like this thing that happened for me that like changed my life or helped me when I was having a hard time. So I do hear that an awful lot. But it's interesting that you brought that up, actually, Suzanne, because that particular scene resonated a lot with me as well. Being somebody that suffers from anxiety, and it wasn't that particular line that I fixated on myself. It was a slightly earlier one, which is fear only exists for one purpose, to be conquered.
Yeah.
And that was a line that really, really resonated with me and kind of got me into a place where I went to counselling and I got help and sort of started to feel like I could get over some of the stuff that I was having issues with. And you know, that it's not, you don't have to be beholden to these things. You know, if you're having issues, you don't have to just take it. You can get help and you can work through it. And if you believe that you can work through it, then you'll get there. So that's a scene, I think, that resonates for a lot of people in different ways. Obviously a very different way from me than from you, but, you know, resonated a lot with both of us.
Definitely. It's always important to remember you're not alone. No matter what you think, you aren't. There's always someone there to help.
I think that's an important episode because more and more in life, I see it in myself, but I see it in other people a lot too. The fact that we're all more driven by fear than we care to admit. You know, there's some sort of deep-seated anxiety or fear about life or situations or the world or your job or whatever it is, right? There's some deep-seated fear, and we're very reactive about that fear, and this unconscious fear drives a great many of our actions way more than we care to admit. And being able to recognize that that's happening inside you and mustering up the strength to move beyond it is a very important step of becoming kind of self-aware in some enlightened sense.
Yeah, and I mean, that episode, I hear people just dismiss it, and I understand if it's not something that resonates with you personally, that you might just see it and go, oh, look at the goofy costumes, oh, look at the slightly silly idea for a plot, like how random is it that you've gone to this thing and there's a computer with this fear thing living in it. And it is all a bit out there, but I think a lot of the time when I hear people talk about Voyager and why they think Voyager isn't necessarily as good as some of the other Star Treks, they miss the point for me, which is just that it's not about the fact that it's this idea or whatever. It's about the significance of that episode for people and the messages that it gave. I mean, we've already both talked about like how important it was to us and it is to other people, you know. And I get frustrated when I hear people talk about episodes of Voyager and dismiss them when I'm like, well, you're missing what the point is, which is the personal significance of this to people. And like and how it makes people feel about themselves and how it makes people feel about their ability to get through things that they might have struggled with otherwise. And that's where I get kind of, I try not to get kind of annoyed and cross on social media. It's something that I tried very hard not to do. I try to be very reasonable.
Oh, sure, Kay. We see your posts.
I mean, I will say all this stuff to like mates, but I won't necessarily put it out there. But I do get very frustrated when I hear people dismiss Voyager for very superficial reasons when actually the reasons why people love it are a lot deeper. And they're just missing that. And I find that really frustrating because it's hard to explain it without coming up with your own personal stories like what we're doing now. It's very hard to explain that to somebody else, why it's like, well, actually, no, it means something to me on a much deeper level than that. And that's why it's important.
But I think that's what it is. With Voyager, I honestly had a hard time with this topic because unlike you guys, I never really had a Voyager epiphany. So my stories are going to sound really shallow because I don't have a Voyager epiphany story. But I do think that for all of us, there are these little personal moments, whether they're moments watching Voyager in a certain environment or with certain people or thinking about some situation you're in while an episode happens to be on. That kind of situatedness of watching Voyager is very important. And so for me, as I think through, what my favorite Voyager moments are, I kept coming back to moments with people. Like, well, I remember when I watched these moments, and that mattered to me more than the actual episodes necessarily. They became nostalgic for me for those kinds of reasons, as opposed to something in the show in particular.
So kind of like they were a touchstone in your life.
Yeah, like for example, I remember when Voyager premiered. This was 1995. I remember watching that at my grandmother's house and sitting on this old 1960s shag green carpet, watching it on her old 1960s color television, with these little red and green color knobs on it. I remember the smell of the living room. I remember the warmth of the television. Like, I can totally picture myself watching the premiere of Voyager in that weird environment. Yeah, and that's how I think of the premiere of Voyager,
Yeah.
like, and that's a happy memory for me
that's
because it's
great.
my grandmother's house. So it's not, again, that has nothing to do with the episode, but that's one of the important Voyager moments for
Yeah.
me because it reminds me of these things that I care about. Is that about Voyager in particular? No, but that's the kind of thing that really resonated with me, and similar to that. So I watched the premiere, and then I probably watched one or two more episodes. Then I stopped watching Voyager altogether until I was living in graduate student housing at UC Santa Cruz. And I might have told this story before. I think maybe I did in our first episode of To the Journey together. But there was no Star Trek on television. Like I only got like 10 channels on TV, and I found out that at a certain time of night they were showing Voyager. I was like, oh, Star Trek on television, but it's Voyager. I'm like, oh. I don't remember liking Voyager all that much, honestly, because I watched a couple episodes and kind of stopped watching it. But I started watching it. I think I started watching it around the time of the Captain Proton episodes. Because I have this memory of just cracking up at Captain Proton in the middle of my little tiny dorm room, my little tiny 13-inch color television, and totally falling in love with the humor of the show. And that's kind of what I needed at that moment. I was having a stressed out time in grad school because grad school was stressful. I was living by myself in this tiny little apartment. And, I just needed some Star Trek. And the humor of Voyager totally got me through that time period. So, okay, I guess it's not as important as your guys' stories, but it's a personal moment.
It is though. It's personally significant to you.
I'm going to make a guess that it was the Delaney sisters that did it.
Oh, brought me back every single time.
The Delaney sisters got Zach through university. There you go.
I think Tom Paris probably has a story like that.
Yeah, I'm sure he does. I'm sure he's got lots of Starfleet Academy stories about all kinds of things that he got up to. That wouldn't surprise me in the slightest. But you're absolutely right, Zach. I mean, like, it's the personal significance again, different kind of personal significance, but it is a personal significance to you, and it's things that other people don't see when they watch the episode. For me, like, Voyager, more than any of the other Star Treks, like, it just has this warmth to it. There's just this warmth and this nice feeling to it that it just feels welcoming, and it feels... There are some challenging episodes, and we've talked about some of those already, but there's just a level of it being a nice, easy thing to watch, and it just being welcoming and homely.
Like family.
And enjoyable in that way. Yeah, absolutely. And it just feels nice in that way, that it almost like it opens its arms up and kind of welcomes you in when you put it on.
And I think it's that reason that Voyager kind of became my bedtime story. I tend to watch Voyager late at night when I'm really tired. Even when I'm really stressed out, I'll put it on, I'll kind of go to sleep to it. I'll close my eyes and just listen to the audio. It's almost like a Star Trek guided meditation. It's that soothing for me.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it's not to say that Voyager didn't handle some really important topics and didn't go to some really dark places, because it does do.
It does.
But the fact that it manages to do that, and it sits alongside the fact that we get all these warm, homely, funny episodes and nice family episodes and all that type of thing, the fact that it can just do that and it can just chop and change from week to week, and it does it successfully, I think is pretty amazing, because so many shows fail to do that. They fail to kind of sit the humour alongside the more serious stuff. And Voyager is really successful at that for me. I think it does it really well. And Star Trek in general is really successful at that, but I think Voyager in particular is good at doing that.
Well, I was trying to think about what it is about Voyager in particular that makes those stories fascinating to me, because at a certain point, like I said, I never watched Voyager in its first run other than the first couple of episodes, and I rediscovered it, and at a certain point it became the Star Trek I like the most. And I don't know exactly when that transition happened. It was probably a fuzzy gray line. But as I think about the difference between Star Trek in general and Voyager in particular, I think Star Trek in general is really good at putting the mirror back at the human species as a whole. Where are we going as a people? What should our future be in this collective sense, right? But I think Voyager is a little more narrowly focused than that. It focuses more on individuals and who they are and where individuals are going. And by extension, our lives. It puts the mirror back at me and at you guys. It makes me think, who am I? What do I want? What do I want to do in life? More so than, not on this sort of grand cosmic universal global scale, but in a very sort of personal way. And a great many of my favorite episodes in Voyager kind of have those personal touchstone moments. I'm thinking of things like Harry Kim playing his clarinet in Night, right? Just, okay, what do I do with this existential boredom? Who am I and where are we going and what do I want to do? Even episodes like maybe Someone to Watch Over Me, like the Doctor has this thing for 7 of 9 that's been brewing, and he knows he can be more than the sum of his programming, and he's got this affection for someone, and it makes him think, who am I and what do I want? And he's got this kind of inner mental, emotional tension inside of him. And Voyager, I think, dwells on those internal moments almost more than other Star Trek series.
And it's always something that's relatable. I mean, even though you're not a hologram in love with an ex-Borg.
How do you know?
Well, Zach, we've talked about this.
If anyone is, it's probably me, right?
You kept that quiet, is all I'm saying.
But it doesn't have to be anything like that. Like something like another really silly episode like Tinker, Tenor, Doctor, Spy, right? Mm-hmm. There's an example of the Doctor wanting to be something more than he is. He wants to be the emergency command hologram. And we've all had moments like that. Like, I want to be something greater than what I am, or something different than what I am. And that here we get to see the Doctor acting out this this fantasy that he has of being the emergency command hologram. And there's just little moments. There's silly stuff like the little pips that show up on his collar.
You love those pips.
Yeah,
those are great.
And the fact that we actually get to see that, but normally that's the kind of thing that would just be going on inside somebody's head, you know, people's crazy fantasies that they come up with about all kinds of different things.
Yeah, and we all have those moments, like, who am I and what do I want to be? And we imagine these alternative futures for ourselves, and we live out this fantasy life. And it's fun to see the Doctor as a hologram having that same kind of internal mental monologue and mental daydreaming that we all have.
Yeah, every Star Trek fan surely at some point has imagined what would it be like if I lived in the 24th century and this was all real and I could be in Starfleet and I could be the captain or the first officer and I could do all this cool stuff and all of that. You know, we've all been there. We've all thought about that. We've all played the video games and we've all read the books and we've all put ourselves into that place.
And written the stories.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All the characters in Voyager have their kind of come to Jesus moment where it's like, who am I and what do I want to be? Like, I'm thinking of Tuvok in Riddles, right? He loses his logic and he's got to kind of re-envision who he is. You know, there's a danger that maybe he'll never return to the Tuvok he was, and he'll have to, adjust permanently. And of course, they get the Voyager reset button at the end, and he ends up very much like he was. But we're all like that. We go through these events that change us. We go through trauma or joys or whatever, and we have to decide, what am I going to do? Do I go back to the past, or do I, take a leap forward into the future and find the new normal? And that's a very, again, it's not cosmic or it's not global, but it's important for Tuvok. He has to decide, who am I now? Am I going to go back to being logical Tuvok who's not having any fun, or am I going to bake cookies once in a while?
And the same thing happened with Tuvix. He had to figure out who he was and where he was going to fit in.
Yeah, and so many episodes in Voyager focus on who is this character and what do they want and what are they going to do going forward. And I think that for me is more interesting than the geopolitics of Star Trek.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I mean, as much as we all love the science fiction elements of it and like the fantasticness of it and how far removed it is from where we are, I think all of the science fiction really is just a backdrop for the human story. And I say human in the broadest sense because I know they're not all human, but that's the story that we're telling, It's about the human experience. That's what we're talking about, really. And it's just a backdrop for that. Yeah. It's just a setting in which we can tell those stories.
That's it. We are those characters. When Tuvok has his existential crisis, we're Tuvok, right? We've all been through something that changes us, and we have to decide, who are we now? Do I go back to being who I was, or do I try to find a new path forward? Who do I want to be? And Tuvok has to face that. We all have to face that.
And going back to the conversation we were having before we started recording about heritage, we're all Chakotay, trying to figure out where we fit.
We are all Chakotay.
Trying to embrace our heritage.
Well, I mean, we talked a lot about Chakotay a couple of weeks ago and about him and his journey and how he's trying to figure out who he is and where he fits in and what he wants and all the rest of it, and how relatable that makes him as a character. So we've already kind of touched on a lot of that, but yeah, I mean, I was thinking when you were talking about people having to go through these kind of crises or having to go through these questions where they're trying to figure out who they are, you reminded me of the episode Sacred Ground, which is an episode that I really enjoy, where Janeway kind of has her faith in science, because I think her belief in science is so strong that I would call it a faith, even though it's not a recognized faith in the same way that religions are. But she has that shaken and she has that put into question, and she has to think about, well, I've had this weird spiritual experience. What does it mean? How does it fit in with my belief system? And how does it change me going forward? So it just made me think of that a lot. And I mean, although I'm not a spiritual person and I've never really been through that myself, I know that a lot of people go through these kind of challenges where they question their spirituality or they question their belief system, and they have to try and figure all of that out. So, you know, I'm sure that episode, I enjoy it, not for that reason, but I'm sure that episode has a lot of personal significance for a lot of people.
Well, every single character goes through one of these what do I really want moments. I'm thinking of the episode Non Sequitur. The episode where Harry Kim, through some weird time event, gets sent into an alternate timeline where he's back in San Francisco, back with Libby.
Coffee shop dude.
Coffee shop dude is there, exactly. I want to hang out with coffee shop dude.
We wrote him into our movie.
We did. He played an important part in the movie, if you recall.
He did. Space Starbucks guy. That's what we called him, Space Starbucks guy.
But this is a great episode to me because Harry Kim is in a position now where he has pretty much everything he wants. He's back home on Earth. He's got Libby there. He's working on a project he's interested in. He's got everything. And yet there's this existential dissatisfaction. This is not right. This is not how it's supposed to be. He has to get back on Voyager because that's where he really belongs. And it just forces the question, oh, Harry, who are you? You can have everything you want right now. What do you really want, dude? Do you try to hit the reset button and go back to Voyager, or do you stay where you're at?
But then he gets back and he goes back to whining again. It's like, dude, you chose to go back.
He's a serious grass is greener on the other side kind of guy.
Maybe he just likes whining. I've met people like that in my life that just enjoy to have a moan. Yeah. They just really enjoy having a whinge and they just find anything they possibly can to have a moan about every single day. I've worked with people like that, actually. So, yeah, maybe that is Harry all over. Maybe Harry just likes to complain.
That is now my headcanon.
Maybe we finally hit the nail on the head with Harry. We've just uncovered his character. I mean, I do have a few more moments that kind of have significance to me. One that I particularly always think of is a moment in Coda where we have Captain Janeway's, in inverted commas, funeral scene, because we know she's not actually dead, or she's kind of in limbo
Mostly
at that
dead.
point, isn't she? She's kind of like semi-dead. But they have this funeral scene which may or may not be real. It's all very meta in that episode. But anyway, we get this little speech by B'Elanna, and I think I've talked about this particular moment before, but the fact that we get this lovely line from B'Elanna where she says, the thing that she taught me and taught a lot of us here is that we're better and stronger than we think.
Yes.
And I remember watching that episode for the very first time and crying my eyes out at that line and just really kind of taking that line to heart a lot as well, and sort of going, do you know what? I can deal with all the stuff that's going on. Janeway believes that everybody here is better and stronger than they think. But it, you know, the way that she says it and the way that it's presented in that episode, it doesn't just feel like she's saying it to everyone there. It feels like she's saying it to the audience as well. Like, that's how I've always taken it. Like, it really feels kind of like there's a message there on that level, and I just really appreciate that moment as well. And I do remember watching that and getting quite emotional about that. And I still well up at that scene now, to be honest. I don't know how many times I've watched that episode now, but it's a lot of times.
It's interesting to me how many characters in Voyager ultimately decide that they belong together as a family on Voyager, even if it means being stuck in the Delta Quadrant. Tom Paris says as much when, I think it's in Endgame or maybe right before, when Harry Kim is saying, we've got this new thing, we might get home, I'm so excited. And he's like, Harry, I am home. this is I have everything I want here on Voyager. And even Captain Janeway, when she gets the opportunity to reset the timeline in Shattered, you know, she has the opportunity now to hear the voice of the future in Chakotay and do something different, and Chakotay convinces her that life on Voyager is actually really good and she should, and that's actually what she ends up going with, because that's where she belongs. That's the natural course of events. And I think all the characters kind of have this we belong together realization or epiphany inside the show.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think if you're thrown together in that sort of situation, and I mean, whilst all the characters are very relatable, and we can probably relate to the situation on like a lesser level, I think that is a particular situation that's hard to really relate to completely, because, you know, none of us have ever got lost 50,000 light years from home.
I was pretty close.
With the prospect of potentially never getting back again, chucked together with a whole bunch of people that you don't really know.
Can you imagine the existential crisis of the alternate crew in Course Oblivion, though, when they realize that they're not actually who they think they are, and they're disintegrating and falling apart? They're not even human.
Is heartbreaking.
It is heartbreaking.
It is, and I mean, that's an example of how Voyager manages to really go deep.
It goes deep and it dwells on their reactions to it, right? They think they're human. They have all the memories of the Voyager crew. They're literally falling apart, and they have to come to terms with who and what they are in that moment. And they really draw it out in a really existentially interesting way to me.
And I desperately wanted something of theirs to survive so the other crew knew that they were there. Just for them to disappear, it rips your heart out.
Yeah.
So the good news, Suzanne, is that if we are duplicates, we have left some great podcasts behind.
That is true.
For the real versions
but
of us.
Those podcasts will disappear along with everything else.
Bad news, everyone.
If you're the alternate crew, maybe.
Whatever device you're listening on right
download
now,
them all now.
it's going to disintegrate soon.
That'll get sticky inside your podcast player when it all reduces to goop.
Ugh.
But you're absolutely right, I mean, the fact that we relate to these characters so much and the fact that we get so attached to them is the reason why that particular scene and scenes like it have so much impact. Because we're so attached to them. If we didn't have this kind of level of being able to put ourselves into their place, it wouldn't have the same impact because we feel exactly what they're feeling. And that's why it just really rips at you. It's really heartbreaking.
Yeah. And for me, those episodes are just always inherently more interesting. More interesting than action scenes, more interesting than pew, pew, pew. Right? This is who we are. We all have to come to terms with our free will and our self-identity. And we have to decide, who am I and what am I doing and what do I want in life? And that is way more dramatic than any of the action stuff you get in Star Trek.
Oh, definitely. And going back to Night, Janeway dealing with the consequences of her actions and becoming depressed about that. And saying that she made an error in judgment when really she didn't. In my mind, she didn't make an error in judgment, but still she's feeling that way and internalizing and just becoming so depressed that she's responsible for stranding everyone where they are.
And as I am the absolute king of overthinking, I totally relate to that. I have second-guessed almost every decision I've made at some point or another.
Including everything he's ever said on every podcast.
Yeah, every dad joke.
Yes.
Like, no, don't put that in. No, let me re-say that.
Are you mocking me?
Always.
No, we're just speaking the truth.
I do that. You listeners don't hear this, but I do tend to go, oh crap, don't put that in.
You do that a lot, yeah. And normally I'm very kind and I don't.
I'm off the rails, don't put that in there.
Let me say that again. Did that sound okay?
It's interesting what you were saying, Zach, about how it's not the action sequences that kind of make the show, it's all of the personal story. And I know we talked a few weeks ago when we did our commentary on Year of Hell, which is an episode that all of us love. But even though that is an episode that is action on a grand scale, it's not the action that is what we love about that episode. That, again, is just the backdrop that puts the characters under pressure where we get to see all of this personal stuff, and it's the vehicle through which we can see us get deeper into the characters, and that's what is great about that episode, not the action in and of itself.
Yeah, and I think Voyager does this in an interesting way. Voyager, it does it in a slightly more humorous way than other Star Trek series in a lot of cases. It also does it in a slightly slower, more introspective way than a lot of other Star Trek series. Voyager has its great action scenes, though. I mean, when they introduce the Borg with Scorpion, there's amazing stuff that happens. It's such a fun ride to go on. And I think the juxtaposition of the fun parts of Voyager with the deep and slow and thoughtful reflectiveness and character introspection we get on Voyager, for some people that juxtaposition doesn't work. They don't get how those two things match up, and it's kind of a dichotomy. But for me, those are really unified and makes for a show that I really enjoy watching.
Well, I think the only other moment that I wanted to specifically mention is the moment that you guys hear every week at the top of our show, which is a moment from Endgame, which is an episode that I don't think that we're all massive fans of that episode in general, but it does have some great moments in it. I wouldn't write it off entirely.
I don't know if I have a moment in Endgame that really, other than maybe Voyager getting home.
No.
Voyager getting home, that's... No,
Janeway visiting Chakotay's grave.
Yeah.
Really?
Oh, rips my
I roll my
heart
eyes at that every
cry.
time. Really?
Yeah.
I don't get saccharin
Right
with
in the
Voyager
gut.
like you guys do. It's funny.
That's because you're heartless.
Yeah.
No, I'm totally not. I'm quite the opposite, but Voyager doesn't actually bring that out in me very much. But I do
Dallas
get a
does.
little tear in my eye when Voyager makes it home at the very end. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, when Janeway kind of repeats the same line that she said in the pilot, that's a beautiful moment.
Yeah.
Like, the fact that they chose to do that is just beautiful. Like, it just bookends the show, like, really perfectly. The fact that we get that set a course for home, you know, at the beginning and the end. It's just lovely.
I remember watching Endgame. So, again, to kind of recap my Voyager story, I watched the premiere and then I quickly faded out and I rediscovered it later. But I actually remember watching Endgame too because I wanted to find out what happened. I was interested enough to where I wanted to find out the very end of it, even though I hadn't watched most of the show at that point.
The end.
Spoiler alert, they get home.
Exactly. I was over at my mom's house and I called some friends over and we had this little get together, like a little Star Trek party to find out how Voyager was going to
Like
end.
The Simpsons did. They had a Bon
Right.
Voyage Voyager party.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was very much like
I'd
that.
forgotten about that.
What was funny, though, is I hadn't watched most of the series at that point, but I really did want to know whether they made it home or not. So I watched the beginning
It'd
and I
be a
watched
bit
the end and
rubbish
almost
if they
nothing in
didn't.
the middle.
Did anyone dress up as 7 of 9 at your party?
No one dressed up.
Oh.
It was not that kind of party.
Well, Lenny dressed up on The Simpsons. He dressed up as 7,
Yes.
which I think was awesome.
I do remember that, actually. But I mean, I just love the fact that, you know, as much as we've talked about Harry and his whining and stuff, and I don't mind Harry as much as you, Suzanne. I know you're not a Harry fan, but I just love the fact that he's the one that gets to say, you know, it's not about the journey, it's about the destination there in the end. And I mean, if that's one message that you can take from Voyager, I mean, it's right there.
It is.
Don't be always worrying about where am I trying to get to in life, you know, what is my goal, what do I want to be, you know, enjoying the present, being present and enjoying what you're doing and just taking it all in, because that is life, really. My dad has this saying, he says, life is what happens to you whilst you're planning to do other things.
Definitely enjoy each day, because you never know when the people you're with are going to leave you.
Yeah.
Like Kay leaving us.
Oh.
But I'm not leaving you guys, you know, we're still gonna be tight.
Hey, you're breaking up with us. What are you talking about?
I'm not breaking
It's all
up.
your fault, Zach.
I can't handle the dad jokes anymore.
Or the Julia Child impersonation.
Or the Julia Child impersonation.
That might be one of the silliest things I have ever done in any kind of public environment. But seriously, I think we humans are so bad at this. We humans tend to take where we're at and we project ourselves into the future. What I want next week, next year, in life, things I don't have, right?
Yeah.
We forget to just stop and say, where am I right now? And hey, right now is actually pretty awesome.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you know, we spend so much of our lives living in the past and living in the future rather than living in the present.
Yeah.
And one of the most important things that you can try and learn to do, and it's not easy at all, and it's something that, you know, I struggle with on a daily basis, but, you know, trying to be present, trying to focus on what we're doing right now, and it's something that will just improve your life immeasurably if it's something you've captured the ability to do.
Yeah.
The thing, though, is that it really is important to think about the future, right? You do have to make plans, and you do have to think
Yes,
about what
of
you
course.
want, and you do have to think about where we could go as an individual or as a species. You can't not do that, right? Otherwise, we'll never go anywhere in life.
But it can't take up
No.
all of your being.
Yeah, the key
Absolutely.
is this tension or this balance between constantly projecting ourselves into the future in a dreamlike sense, you know, anticipating and hoping and yearning and, you know, dreaming about where we could be, and yet recognizing kind of the reality of the moment. Like, we're still here and
Yeah.
we still need to have a good time while we're here too.
Well, exactly. And the message that one of the really important messages that I think we get from Voyager is that the crew, whilst they don't necessarily do it consciously, we watch them over the course of the show learn that even though they're on this quest to get home, they learn how to live in the present. You know, they can't just put their entire lives on hold because we're trying to get home, because they don't know how long it's going to take and they don't know when it's going to happen, and they can't just focus on that at the cost of actually living, because as we hear at the start of the show, you know, this could be the rest of their lives. So they can't just focus on that at the risk of not enjoying what's going on around them. And as time goes on through the show, we see more and more them starting to actually enjoy and, you know, live and do things together as a family and like have their life on Voyager, because that becomes their life.
See, now I'm kind of picturing Harry Kim kind of sitting there thinking to himself, feeling a little depressed. He's like, you know, someday I'm still going to be an ensign and I'm going to be reporting to Commander Icheb.
Yeah, and Captain Naomi.
Hey, get over it, Harry. Live in the moment. Come on.
And I mean, even Harry gets there.
After 7 years.
Yeah, in the finale, but he gets there. Finally. He's the one that says, do you know what? I've been the one pushing to get home, but actually, it's the journey that's important.
Yeah.
And if we've got to put ourselves on hold because we've got to do something that we think's important, that we think's more important than just our own interest, let's do that thing. And to see him grow like that is pretty awesome from where he starts off. And I mean, if Harry can do it, then
anybody can do it. Exactly.
So how great a message is that?
Yeah, but he's still carting his clarinet and his blanket. Let's not pretend otherwise.
So, in the interest of sort of wrapping things up a bit, I kind of have some more general thoughts. And I mean, I know we've been talking generally and specifically about various bits of Voyager, but I think really, you know, to anyone who has opinions about Voyager where they think, oh, Voyager's just not very good and it's not as well written as some of the other Star Treks and there's all X, Y, Z problems, whatever people want to list about it. What I would say to them is this, which is that ultimately I think that Voyager is a show about family. Mm-hmm. It's a show about living in the moment. It's a show about never giving up. It's a show about giving people second chances. Mm-hmm. It's a show about it never being too late to change. About it never being too late for you to make something of yourself, even if you think that you've written yourself off. And those are the things that I would really pull out of Voyager and say, you know what? You can say whatever you want about the writing. You can say whatever you want about everything that went on behind the scenes and how it was put together, all the problems that they had with UPN and everything. But that is what I take from Voyager. And if people go to me, oh, well, why is Voyager your favourite? Well, that's why. And those messages are more important than any of the little stuff.
I think for me, as much as I love other Star Trek series, you know, I grew up when I was a little kid watching the original series, and I grew up as a preteen and teenager watching TNG, and then eventually ended up watching some Deep Space Nine and whatnot. But in some of those series, I don't necessarily identify with the characters as strongly as I would like to. Like, I'm just going to pull a random character. Like, I don't identify with Commander LaForge very much in TNG, right? He doesn't give me enough there.
You're better with women.
On a good day. Right? There it is.
There aren't many people who are worse with women than Geordi. Let's put it that way.
I'm better than Geordi. Okay. But I identify with the Voyager characters in a unique way. In a way, I am Captain Janeway, and I'm also Chakotay, and I'm also Tuvok, and I'm also Harry Kim, and I'm also 7 of 9, although you wouldn't know it to look at me.
You don't look a lot like her, I have to say.
But I identify with something about each of those characters that makes me look inward and ask those deeper questions about myself. Who am I, and what do I want, and what can I be?
I'm sorry, Kay wrapped it up perfectly for me. I have nothing to add to that. It was beautiful.
I think, you know, if you get Voyager, you get it. And if you don't, you don't. And I think that is just how it's going to be. I don't think you can persuade somebody to like it. I think if they get everything that we've been saying, they get it. And if they don't, they don't. And I think it's as simple as that. Because the people who love Voyager love it. And the people who hate it, hate it. And there's not a lot of space in between, I don't think.
Yeah, I think it takes a certain kind of self-introspection to really appreciate Voyager. That
An
you know,
open
and some
mind.
people are more like that than others.
Yeah, and it just resonates more with some people than others. Like, it just depends on your personality. You know, some people just find it too saccharine and too sweet and syrupy and everything else. But it's what works for you.
Everything we just said about Voyager would absolutely be said by a die-hard fan of Deep Space Nine about Deep Space Nine.
Yeah, I'm sure. And I mean, I love Deep Space Nine. I absolutely love Deep Space Nine, and I love the characters. And I've talked before about my favourite character in Star Trek is on Deep Space Nine, not on Voyager. But
Oh, is she?
the personal resonance is not quite the same with Deep Space Nine. And I don't know whether that's just because of the timing. And if I'd watched Deep Space Nine at that time in my life, I'd have found things about Deep Space Nine to enjoy. But it just seems like Voyager has that level of warmth, and invitation to it that other Star Trek shows don't, and I think it just lends itself towards helping you in that way. So that's pretty much what I've got to say about Voyager, I think. So obviously you guys will be back. You'll be talking about more great things about Voyager. I'm sure you'll be pulling out lots more of your favourite topics. I know I've been a horrible bully for the last year, and I've been telling you guys, this is what we're going to do next week. So now you guys can decide what you want to talk about.
It's going to be so much easier without you here,
I
Kay.
need leadership.
I know, exactly.
I need leadership.
So, you know, I've sort of been throwing a lot of ideas out there, and you guys have jumped on board with a lot of my ideas. But, you know, I want to see what you guys are going to talk about. I'm looking forward to listening to you and seeing your perspectives, and you coming up with topics that I wouldn't have even thought of, and all that sort of thing. So
Hey, without you here to rein us in, it's going to be like TTJ Unchained.
It is going to be TTJ Unchained.
It's going to be dad jokes all the time.
I'm thoroughly looking forward to it. When I'm feeling depressed, I'm going to be listening in to you guys, because if there's nothing else that we can be certain of, we can be certain that you guys are going to carry on with a fun show. So it has been an honour and a privilege to serve with you.
It's been our honor to serve with you. Please don't go.
The most important thing that I'm taking away from TTJ is you guys as great friends and all the other great people that I've met as a result of doing this.
It will absolutely not be the same without you here, Kay. It'll be better. Just kidding. Just kidding.
Yeah,
I'm not that mean. I'm just kidding.
No, it won't.
You guys will be great.
But seriously, doing To the Journey with you guys for 50 episodes will absolutely be one of the highlights of my entire life. I have no doubt.
Definitely.
Well, it's kind of hard to wrap up after that, isn't it, really? But it isn't the only thing that we've been talking about on Trek FM. So here is a quick look at some of the other things you may have missed elsewhere on the network. Previously on Trek.fm. Standard Orbit.
Oh, you're not going to say that anymore.
I'll record me saying it, and you can play it every week.
Okay.
Previously on Trek.fm, Earl Grey.
It's sort of what she did with Picard and just said, I'm looking at the entire expanse of your career decisions, and these decisions, you've broken the Prime Directive. And so looking at this mass, it sort of brought it back to conspiracy, where it's like, yeah, you're going to find something and there may be excuses for it, but what's the pattern overall? I thought was an interesting twist that she did against Picard.
Warp 5.
The reason why I'm surprised by this is because you don't see a lot of asexual reproduction in higher order life forms, because sexual reproduction allows for genetic diversity, whereas, again, asexual reproduction dictates genetically identical individuals.
The 602 Club.
What happened last season and the things that start to happen this season is, Jay comes in and tells them about the danger from Earth 2 with Zoom and everything. You can see the weight that it's having on this person, and I thought that that's just really good writing. Like, that you can't stay that same kind of person that he was in the beginning here. And they're going to do some things throughout the season that are going to help Barry kind of overcome that, or at least try to overcome that. But at the beginning, I really felt like that the writing was very strong, specifically for the character of Barry and everything he'd been through in that first season, and now into the second season.
Literary Treks.
Yeah, that's definitely the case, I think, for sure. Well, in this novel, it's very much about the Klingons and their society, and it's from the perspective there's a framing story basically in which Captain Kirk starts reading a book called The Final Reflection, which is told from the perspective of the Klingons, and it's ostensibly the book that we are reading here. This is the book that Kirk's reading in this book.
And that's what else is happening on Trek.fm.
So check out all of these shows and join the conversation about your favourite corner of the Star Trek universe and beyond. You will find us wherever you get your podcasts. If you're an Apple user, be sure to hit the subscribe button in Apple Podcasts on iPhone, iPad or Apple TV, or the desktop iTunes app to get the latest episodes as soon as they're published. And please leave us a star rating and a written review. If you're not an Apple user, we've got you covered as well. You can find our shows on Google Play Music, Stitcher, TuneIn, Spreaker, SoundCloud, Windows Phone, in most third-party apps, and you can stream and download the MP3 file from our website or grab the RSS link. And just to remind you all, we've still got our iTunes review contest running. When is it running till, guys? Is it another couple of weeks?
Until when episode 241 hits the network.
So it's about another week or so then from this point where this episode's actually going to drop. So if you go into iTunes and leave us a review and a star rating, if you do that anywhere other than the US store, please make sure that you email or message us on Twitter or Facebook to let us know that you've done that, because we don't get notifications of reviews from all of the stores, and we can only really easily check the ones that are in the location that we're in. But you can win a Voyager box set, which has been very kindly donated by Ju Kim. So if you want to get on that, make sure that you do that in the next week or so.
We'd love to hear your thoughts on today's show, and there are many ways for you to do that. The best place to join in the larger conversation is the Babel Conference, our listeners-only group on Facebook. Just type Babel, that's B-A-B-E-L, into the search field on Facebook, and it should come right up. If you'd like to send us an email, you can use the form on our website at trek.fm/contact. Choose Message to a Trek.fm show and select To the Journey. That will come right to us. You can also find the network on Twitter at TrekFM, and on Facebook at facebook.com/TrekFM. Well, Zach, when you're not sitting on a green shag carpet in your grandma's house, where can our listeners find you?
Well, you can find me elsewhere on Trek.fm as co-host of Metatrek's Trek FM show on Star Trek and philosophy, along with my co-host over there, Mike Morrison. You can always find me in the Babel Conference if you'd like to talk about Voyager with me over there, and you're welcome to follow me on Twitter. My handle is just my name, at Zachary Fruhling. That's Zachary, Z-A-C-H-A-R-Y, Fruhling, F-R-U-H-L-I-N-G. And Kay, when you're not busy adjusting to having your own quarters down on Deck 6, where can our listeners find you on the interwebs and around the Trek FM network?
Well, you can hear me elsewhere on the network on the latest episode of Primitive Culture. You can also find me in the Babel Conference, and if you want to look me up on Twitter, my handle there is Choco Weeble. So, Suzanne, when you're not hiding out in the mess hall away from Harry's whining, where can our listeners find you?
Well, you can find me popping up every now and again in the Babel Conference, or you can look me up on Twitter. My handle is KJaneway8.
Well, if you'd like to help us keep all of our shows coming to you each week, we invite you to become a patron of the network on Patreon. Visit patreon.com/TrekFM, that's patreon.com/TrekFM to get all the details. Perks include early access to episodes, exclusive content, producer credits, and many more, all available through our special patrons website, the Patron Zone. It requires a great deal of time and money to produce, host, and distribute these podcasts each month. We really appreciate any support you can give us, and we hope you'll join the team. Again, you'll find all the details at patreon.com/TrekFM.
We'd like to take this moment to thank a few people. First off, C. Brian Jones, the founder and publisher of Trek.fm, who incidentally got us stranded here in the Delta Quadrant. Executive producers Matthew Rushing and Kenneth Tripp. Aaron Harvey, our art director. Richard Marquez, our production manager. And Brandon Shamatella, our Patreon manager. Also, a very big thank you to our associate producers, Bruce Lish, Ju Kim, Richard Marquez, Patrick Carlin, and Norman Lau.
Well, Kay, it's your final episode of To the Journey, so you get the final word. Take us home.
So, join Zach and Suzanne next time when they will be continuing the quest to find themselves. But until then, this has been To the Journey.